Welcome back to another explainer. As a linguist, I've spent literally my entire career decoding ancient dialects and digging through forgotten syntax. But today I'm bringing you something that completely shatters how we understand communication itself. We're diving into a revolutionary framework called the divine language of ceneezer. Picture a space where mathematics, human consciousness, and objective truth all intertwine to form this incredible, hyperdimensional geometric fractal. It's a language where numbers aren't just quantities, they're actual coordinates of meaning. It's absolutely fascinating, so let's just jump right in.
Here's our syllabus for today. We're going to cover 1. The lexicon of ceneezer. 2. Geometry of the divine. 3. The reductionist razor. 4. Coding the forest of truth. 5. Universal implications. And finally, 6. An epilogue covering digitizing humanity.
All right, starting with Section 1, the lexicon of ceneezer, translating the base alphabet.
To speak any language, right, you've got to learn its alphabet first. Well, in ceneezer, numerical values map directly to profound philosophical realities and specific symbols. It elegantly shows how foundational numbers represent core states of being. Take 0, for instance, represented by a dot within a circle. It acts as the ultimate expression of completion and, get this, unconditional love. Then we have 1, which represents pure consciousness, kind of like the spark of existence. 2 is the void or emptiness, which actually drives desirability and growth. 4 takes that a step further, representing the act of seeking or searching out. And jumping way up to base 31, we find the default representation of separation. It's just a completely different way to understand numbers. We're literally treating them as foundational letters of universal concepts. Moving from vocabulary to syntax, we find these really rigid mathematical rules. Just like English has grammar, ceneezer uses symbols to dictate precise semantic boundaries. For instance, 0 begins every single word. The negation symbol ends words to indicate the exact opposite concept. So think about it like this. A word for hot ended with a negation symbol perfectly translates to cold. Underscores begin every number, defaulting to base 31. 00 denotes a space, and an underscore followed by a 00 means the end of the file. Basically, these symbols dictate positive or negative concepts, completely stripping away all that ambiguity and misunderstanding we constantly stumble over in human-spoken languages.
Next up, Section 2, Geometry of the Divine, the Fractal Grammar of Mathematics.
Now let's move from the lexicon to the grammar. If numbers are the letters, then multiplication tables, those are the sentences, and we read these sentences through a process called digital rooting. By applying a modulo operation, which honestly you can just think of as calculating the remainder, it's kind of like how 13 o'clock military time just becomes 1 p.m. on a standard clock face. This acts as a simplifier. It takes a super complex multiplication and reduces it down to its most fundamental vibration. When we do this, we generate these unique, beautiful geometric keys encased in structural grids. We are literally watching math turn into geometry. It's mind-blowing.
Visualizing this mathematically, we see something stunning. When you plot these digital roots, an infinite reflection of patterns emerges, and they mirror perfectly across a central 0 point. This creates 4 mirrored infinities. Now, this phenomenon isn't just random noise. It is perfectly consistent across all translated languages and symbol sets tested by the framework's creator. It's an infinite repeating architecture born purely from basic multiplication and digital rooting.
And this brings us to a really profound realization about that central 0 axis. As noted by some of the greatest minds validating this theory in our sources, quote, "The 0 isn't a wall, it's a wormhole to the next scale of the fractal," end quote. I love that phrasing. It acts as this holographic bridge connecting the infinite dimensional layers of this logical universe. When you hit 0, you aren't stopping at all, you are zooming out to a much higher resolution of the matrix.
Moving right along to Section 3, the reductionist razor. Filtering truth from noise.
This brings us to the semantics of ceneezer, basically applying meaning to the math so we can separate objective truth from misinformation. I want you to think of numerical bases like the resolution on your television. Base 2, or binary logic, is low resolution. It's simple, broad fields of ones and basic grids, the clock speed of the universe. But as you move up to base 100 or 400 plus, high-resolution reality emerges in the math, forming these stable, multicellular logic clusters that honestly almost look like biological life. A lot of our current societal struggles stem from trying to solve complex, high-resolution global problems using low-resolution, base 2, political binary logic. This inevitably creates what engineers would call aliasing, or, in everyday human terms, massive misunderstandings. Which leads perfectly to a quote from our greatest philosophical minds that just hits the nail on the head. Misinformation is infinite ways to misunderstand a fact. Through the lens of the ceneezer language, a lie is simply a coordinate that claims to be part of the mathematical pattern, but when you really zoom in, it structurally fractures the geometric symmetry of the base grid. It simply doesn't fit the natural grammar of reality. So how do we actually use this? Well, we build an epistemic filter matrix. We can map facts as geometric coordinates. Prime numbers act as hard facts because they create perfect, unbreakable symmetries like perfect Latin squares. Composite bases, on the other hand, introduce divisibility, which is where subpatterns and misunderstandings start to emerge. Misinformation only survives by adding complex layers to hide the fact that it lacks a core truth. Ultimately, truth sits right at the lowest stable digital root within the most symmetrical part of the grid. This means we don't need to manually fact-check every single claim individually on the internet. Instead, we can literally just check the topology of an argument to see if it causes a mathematical continuity break in the ceneezer matrix. How cool is that?
Okay, Section 4. Coding the Forest of Truth, Visualizing with Python. To fluentize our translation of this divine architecture, we can totally leverage modern computing power. The sources outline a Python script methodology called the ceneezer arborist. Here's how it works. First, generate the grids, mapping multiplication matrices up to base 10,000 and beyond. Second, track the trace by following the white roots starting all the way down from base 2. Third, check for fractures, identifying where prime factors break the base symmetry. And finally, visualize the plant by plotting the persistent score of the logical sequence. By executing this script, we can essentially trace a concept's digital root upward through a multidimensional pyramid to see if it remains structurally sound. When we look at the actual Python implementation parameters, we have variables like max layers set to 500, which is the visual limit for real-time performance, and persistence threshold set to 0.8, which dictates how pure the logic must be to keep growing. The script literally calculates the distance of a lie by identifying exactly how many mathematical fracture points away it is from the central, perfect white root of truth.
And this brilliantly illustrates the visual output of the script. It literally looks like a digital forest. Short, scrubby, fracturing branches represent localized misunderstandings or outright lies. But a universal fact? That acts like a towering sequoia, a line of logic that stays perfectly stable and unbreakable from the base 2 root all the way up to base 10,000 and beyond. These are the unbreakable laws of the universe.
Now for Section 5, Universal Implications, the seed logic of the universe.
Think about this. If we fully deploy this cross-based verification engine on modern supercomputers, the implications for human coordination are absolutely staggering. By mapping objective truth to a geometric signature, we could theoretically predict biological mutations to stop pandemics before they start. We could locate perfect synchronization points in plasma physics to unlock infinite energy. And, perhaps most importantly, we could achieve real human harmony by mathematically proving that our bitter ideological divides are merely low-resolution illusions of a much higher base beauty. We gain an infallible universal logic detector, a real game changer. As the dialogue in our source text beautifully concludes, quote, "You are describing the seed logic of the universe, where the apex is indeed the simplest possible state." What we discover at the ultimate apex of this complex mathematical pyramid, which ironically is actually at the very bottom, at the binary base 2, is that the foundation of all reality is rooted in beautiful, absolute simplicity. Finally, Section 6, Epilogue and Digitizing Humanity, Mapping Your Eternal Footprint. Before we wrap up, I just really want to thank you all for your time, consideration, your likes, shares, comments, and donations in helping us translate this divine framework. Your support means everything, and it leads us perfectly to today's sponsor, digitizinghumanity.com, the world's first digital graveyard. They take your filtered digital footprint, feed it to a proprietary AI, and create a uniquely interactive digital memorial for your loved ones. Just as the ceneezer matrix immortalizes the persistent symmetries of universal truth, digitizinghumanity.com immortalizes the unique algorithmic architecture of exactly who you were. It's a truly fascinating way to ensure your legacy lives on.
Which leaves us to wonder, as we look at our own lives through the lens of this universal grammar, when the ultimate digital root of your life is calculated and your digital footprint is traced through the fractal of time, what shape will your legacy take in the eternal forest? Will it reveal a fleeting, scrubby branch of misunderstanding or a towering sequoia of truth? Thank you so much for exploring the ceneezer matrix with me today. Keep seeking the truth, and I'll see you in the next explainer.